Shalom. Welcome to the ministry of Beth Yeshua, Messianic Synagogue. I'm Rabbi Scott. Welcome to our home. This is our midweek study. It's a Torah study. We go through the Torah parsha by parsha and discuss this with you here over this forum, these YouTube videos that are recorded and broadcast for you. If you'd like, we suggest that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. This allows you to get notifications for these teachings, as well as other teachings and our Shabbat services. We have live in-person Shabbat services, Saturday mornings at 11. These are live streamed and then rebroadcast at any time on demand on our YouTube channel. And if you've arrived here, you've probably seen some of these links. We are open for in-person services. If you are in Fort Myers and would like to join us, we would love to worship with you. Please let us know, and if you have any questions, but we are open for services. The time is 11 a.m. on Shabbat here in Fort Myers. If you would like to reach out to me and contact me via email or the comments below, I would be grateful for that. I do enjoy some of you who do send me your comments, and I try to respond to everything. And so forth. So please send me your comments if you would like to discuss anything. Lastly, for those who have continued to bless us with your gifts and offerings, we're just very, very grateful for this. We know that times are tenuous. For those who give in faith, we thank you. And if you would like to join us in this ministry and partner with us, you can find a link to that in the description of the video below. Without further delay, let's begin this week. This week is Parshat Korach. This is in Bamidbar in the book of Numbers. We are in chapter 16 through 18, verse 32. Parshat Korach recounts the story of an uprising, an insurrection, if you will, against Moses and Aaron. The ensuing punishments to the rebels in the nation, the steps taken to restore the people's confidence in the selection of Moses and Aaron, and then the responsibilities of the priests and the Levites. Let me share something with you on your screen. This is a piece of art by Jean Fouquet, a French artist from the 1400s. And if you look on your screen, you can see here it's a depiction of the Korach rebellion. Here in the background, on a slight knoll, is what looks to be depicted as Moses, and so forth. And some of the other priests and other people are around close, and then some of them are far off. And this is likely what was happening in this parsha. In chapter 16, continuing our summary, in chapter 16, Moses and Aaron are faced with a two-pronged rebellion led by Korach, Datan, and Aviram, and 250 men of rank. Moses suggests that Aaron, Korach, and the 250 men all offer incense to determine whom is Adonai's chosen one. The subsequent consumption by fire of the 250 men and the earth's swallowing of Datan and Aviram provide divine confirmation of Moses and Aaron's selection as leaders and priests. The plague and the confirmation of the choice of Aaron plays out in chapter 17. A plague breaks out to punish the nation for their accusations. Aaron stops the plague by offering incense. Further test this time involving his staffs reconfirms Aaron's divine appointment to the priesthood. And then we have in chapter 18, in response to the children of Israel's fears that they may die through unintentional entry into a restricted area of the tabernacle, God assigns responsibility for guarding the sanctuary to the priests and the Levites. It's kind of the thing that somebody might be so attracted and so interested or intrigued in the Mishkan, they might just stumble in. And so the priests and the Levites are going to guard it. Adonai then outlines the priestly and Levite gifts which they will receive as compensation for their service. This week's summary is provided by Al-Hatorah, alhatorah.org. Al-Hatorah, for your study and research, would be a good place. There's quite a bit of content and material there, so just recommending that. We do a summary of the parsha each week, and I borrow these summaries from different sources, and do recommend that you find a commentary or a good summary source. It can just help you get to the heart of the issue, get up to speed very quickly with the Torah. Okay, rebellion. We have here the narrative of rebellion. It takes place likely and possibly immediately after the failure of the spies. Rambam is one of the commentators that offers this sort of conclusion. Ramban is an abbreviation for Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, who also referred to as Maimonides, who lived in the 1100s. Different ways to pronounce his name. I'm not sure exactly which one is right. I've heard it pronounced both ways. So if there's a scholar out there who knows for sure how to pronounce it, please let me know. To this day, Maimonides and Rashi are the most studied Jewish scholars. Rashi, referring to Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, also lived from 1040 to 1105. These two commentators and writers are probably the most referred to and studied among all Jewish commentators. And so the Ramban places this shortly after, immediately after the failure of the spies. And I like that interpretation, because what we're seeing here in these few parsha in a row is grumbling, complaining, rebellion, calamity, crisis, judgment, and there's just one after the other. And it really kind of highlights the sense of these people. They're not going into the promised land. They're not going to go into Canaan. So what do they do? I mean, what do you do with yourself if you're not going to enter in? And it's the idea of really digging deep to find your purpose and your place on the earth, in spite of the fact that you're not going to go into the promised land, Canaan. The calamity of the loss of the promised land, that this generation will actually die in the wilderness. It was ripe fodder and ripe ground for dissent and rebellion, and for an attempted coup. As long as Israel was moving towards Canaan, things were largely going to be okay. There was no chance of a rebellion practically. But after the disappointment of the judgment of Adonai, anything's on the table. The Korach rebellion in chapter 16 and 17 is chaotic and confusing. The record in the Torah is deliberately confusing, I believe. If you read this parsha, start to finish, or just stay with the narratives, which would be chapter 16 and 17. If you just read the narrative of this, and then close your book and try to take a pop quiz on the material, it can be very difficult. It's almost as if the Torah is deliberately confusing here, which would be a reflection of real life. When there's a political coup, when there's military takeover, when there's a revolution or a rebellion, things are in chaos, things are confusing, and it's the idea that things can go very badly very quickly. Sometimes in the life span of a nation, of a country on the earth, there may be legitimate complaints, there may be issues, legitimate issues that should otherwise be addressed. But what happens are these complaints get hijacked from some people who are seeking power, and then a whole government can fail or fall. This happened in the Russian revolutions beginning from 1905 through 1917. When the Tsars were overthrown, there was widespread corruption, workers were mistreated, rampant poverty, and people becoming restless, and various powerful and charismatic figures were successful at fomenting revolution. This is kind of the life cycle that we see in history. And this is indeed what I think is happening here during the Korach rebellion. Here in our Torah portion appears to be an event that was an attempted revolution. There are two simultaneous sorts of insurrections going on here. You almost need a scorecard to tell the difference. In chapter 16, verse 1, Vayichach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kehat ben Levi. And to translate that literally from the Hebrew to the English, then took Korach, son of Yishar, son of Kahat, son of Levi. Literally in the Hebrew, it is Korach took, or took Korach. But it doesn't say what he took or who he took. Along with Datan and Aviram, descendants of Reuven, along with the 250 men of Israel, key members, men of reputation. These are men of notoriety. They were respected and revered men in the congregation. All these assembled against Moses and Aaron. You take too much on yourselves. After all, the entire community is holy, every one of them, and Adonai is among them. So why do you lift yourselves up above Adonai's assembly? Moses said to the Korach group, tomorrow Adonai will show who is holy, who can approach him. Bring your censers, all your group. A censer is a bowl on a chain that holds incense. Bring your censers, all your group. Do they have censers? It's what you burn incense in. Did the people of Korach in this rebellion, did they have censers? Did they have a place to put incense? In any case, so Adonai says, all of you bring censers and appear before Adonai tomorrow. Now, some of you who are following my teaching, are saying, uh-oh, this doesn't end well. We've been here before. We're here, it didn't go well. At the consecration of the Mishkan and the priests, Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 10, Nadav and Avihu, sons of Aaron, verse 10, each took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire before Adonai, something he had not ordered them to do. At this, fire came forth from the presence of Adonai and consumed them, so that they died in the presence of Adonai. So we've got an echo here of the death of Nadav and Avihu for bringing strange fire before Adonai. And here we've got these 250 are instructed to bring their censers, bring their incense with their fire. This is how Nadav and Avihu died. Is Moses baiting them to their death? And from Korach's perspective, wasn't he committing suicide by going along with Moses' plan? Surely he and his entire group knew what had happened to Aaron's son on the day of the Mishkan dedication. That quote is by Rabbi Shalom from Los Angeles. After this, Adonai tells them not to drink any intoxicating wine or intoxicating liquor when you approach Adonai. What could be more intoxicating than the desire for power and influence? The part where Adonai tells them not to drink wine or intoxicating liquor comes from Vayikra chapter 10, Leviticus chapter 10. It doesn't address the wine and liquor in the current parsha with Korach and his group. But what does strike me is that there's nothing more intoxicating than the desire for power and influence. There is a clear challenge to Moses' authority and leadership. Korach and his band are intoxicated with the possibility of overthrowing Moses. A little context, a little backstory on Korach. Who is this Korach? Chapter 16 of Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 16, verse 8, Moses said to Korach, listen here, you sons of Levi. Is it for a mere trifle that the God of Israel separated you from the community of Israel to bring you close to himself so that you can do the work in the tabernacle of Adonai and stand before the community serving them? He has brought you close and all your brothers and the sons of Levi with you. Now you want the office of Cohen too? That's why you and your group have gathered together against Adonai. After all, what is Aaron that you complain against him? Notice that this is addressed to the sons of Levi. This is not the people of Reuben. We're talking two different groups here. And then in the very next line, so Moses went to summon Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliav, but they replied, we won't come up. So this shows us that we're dealing with two different groups here. Let's go back and summarize the passage while splitting out the two groups. Rabbi Menachem Leibtag from Los Angeles. I think I quoted it, Rabbi Shalom from Los Angeles. Actually, I believe he's an author from I'm not sure exactly where he's from. He may be from Israel. In any case, Rabbi Menachem Leibtag from Los Angeles Yeshiva identifies two groups. The first group here, so there's two groups, there's two insurrections, two rebellions in effect. The first group is the 250 men, the men of following the way of Korach. They're protesting Aaron's exclusive rights to the Kohanim, to be priest. They stand ready for their test at the Ohel Moed. Note that the Korah consistently refers to this group as Adat Korach, the way of Korach. Group 2, Datan and Aviram and followers. They complain against the political leadership of Moshe. They gather in the territory of Shevet Reuven. This location is later referred to as Mishkan, Korach, Datan, Aviram. Okay, so we've got two groups here. Let's look at these two groups in context with the actual verses. Verse 1 through 4 is referring to both groups. Group 5, verses 5 through 11 refers to group 1. It applies to group 1. This is the 250 men of Korach. Verses 5 through 11 is addressing group 1. This is a complaint of those who want to be priests. Verses 12 through 15 is addressing group 2. This is the summons of Datan and Aviram and their refusal. Verse 16 through 19 is addressing the test of the Torah, the test that Adonai was going to have them do with their censers. This applies to group 1. Verses 20 through 22, Moses' prayer that God punish only the guilty likely applies to both rebellions at the same time. Verses 23 through 34 is group 2, Moses' group 2. Well, it's Korach's group, but they're in opposition to Moses. Verses 23 through 34, earth swallows up Datan, Aviram, and followers. And then verse 25, fire consumes the 250 men. That's a group 1. All right, let's continue to look at this in terms of who was on which side. Group 1 was 250 men. Group 2 was Datan, Aviram, and followers. What was their claim? What was their complaint? Group 1, it was that Moses and Aaron were priests and the other people weren't allowed to be priests. Their claim was against the priesthood. Let's see. Group 1 is opposing Aaron. Group 2 is opposing Moses. The reason, the complaint again is spiritual equality in group 1 and the failure of leadership in group 2. They were critical of of Moses' leading them and thought he was leading them to die in the desert. Group 1 is at a place called Ohel Moed, and group 2 is Shevet Reuven, in the area of the tents of Reuven. Group 1, the punishment was they were consumed by fire, and group 2, the punishment was they were swallowed up by the ground. So as you can see here, there's very clearly, when you start to really parse it and take a step through it, in the Parsha, there are two rebellions or two insurrections going on here. Speaking to Korach and his group, Moses says this, "Hear now, you Levi'im." But they weren't Levi'im. "Hear now, you Levites," is what Moses is saying. But they weren't Levites. That was the whole issue. They weren't Levites, but they wanted to be. I think there is something very significant to their wanting to be Levi'im, wanting to be priests. Consider the history of Kohath. They were the heavy lifters of the Mishkan. They were like the heavy lifters of the Mishkan service corps. It's not unlike the union organizers. We are the heavy lifters. We deserve equal treatment. We're the heavy lifters. Remember, the tribe of Kohath wasn't even supposed to see the furnishings of the Mishkan. The furnishings were draped in blue cloth. Look what the text says, going back to Numbers 4, and we see this. Numbers 4, Bamidbar 4, verse 4. Here is how the descendants of Kohath are to serve in the tent of meeting and deal with the especially holy things. When the time comes to break camp, Aaron is to go in with his sons, take down the curtain which serves as a screen, and cover the ark of the testimony with it. On that they are to place a covering of fine leather, and on top of that spread an all blue cloth. When Aaron and his friends have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy utensils, When the camp is about to move forward, then the descendants of Kohath are to come and carry them. But they are not to touch the holy things, so that they won't die. These things are the responsibility of the descendants of Kohath in the tent of meeting. They're not allowed to see the furnishings or the holy utensils. The blue cloth is an interesting reference here. The blue cloth, of course, is the single thread that's supposed to be woven into the tzitzit. But here we have blue cloths, and again, that's the same word, tekelet. Blue cloths for wrapping up the furniture and for carrying the furniture and protecting the furnishings from being seen by the tribe of Kohath. So, let's see. Skip down to verse 17. Adonai says to Moses and Aaron, "Do not cut off the clan of Kohath from among the Levi'im. Rather do this for them, so that they will live and not die when they approach the especially holy things. Aaron and his sons are to go in, and you are to assign each one to his task. But the descendants of Kohath are not to go in and look at the holy things as they are being covered. If they do, they will die." So you see, this family is required to do the heavy lifting of moving the Mishkan, the tabernacle, but they're being so isolated and insulated away from these furnishings. They're not even allowed to gawk at them. They're not even allowed to look at them. So I would submit to you that there's probably at least, in the human experience, there would be at least some chafing at that sort of circumstance. So we see that the family of Kohath has been set up, if you will, for being in proximity of Adonai, not being able to not even being allowed to enter in, being close to him, but not being allowed to enter in. This is why they complain. Everyone is holy, not just you. And then Moses responds to this in verse 22. They fell on their faces and they said, "O God, God, the spirits of all humankind, if one person sins, are you going to be angry the entire assembly? What does El Elohe Haruchot L'chol Basar, God, the spirits of all flesh?" In your English translation, it probably says something like God, the spirits of all flesh. What can that possibly mean? I would submit to you that it means that Adonai knows the heart, the deep hidden places of people's motivations. You see, what's happening here with this Korach individual is it appears that he's taking both sides and allowing them to kind of complement each other and springboard off of each other in order to have a sizable group that can confront Moses and Aaron's leadership. Adonai says to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron not to come up just any time into the sanctuary inside the tent before the mercy seat that is upon the ark, or he will die, for I appear in the cloud again upon the mercy seat." The cloud is understood by our rabbis to refer to the cloud of the Torah, the incense. Just as Sinai was covered with a thick cloud of Ha'anan during the revelation, similarly, the Mishkan was to be covered with the Anan HaKatoret when God's presence was to be made most manifest. Again, a quote from Rabbi at Shalom. "I'm going to come to you in an Av Ha'anan, a thick cloud, in order that the people may hear when I speak with you, and so trust you ever after." And this is a reference all the way back to Exodus 19. Adonai says to get away from the Mishkan of Korach. And this is fascinating. Adonai says to get away from the Mishkan of Korach. Remember, this rebellion of Korach ended up taking place close to the people of Reuven. Tell the assembly to move away from the homes of Korach, Datan, and Aviram. So look at the Hebrew here. He'alu mitzaviv lemishkan Korach. Adonai says this is their Mishkan, La Mishkan of Korach. In case you thought that that might be the word in Hebrew for tent, it's not. In other words, here when it says Le Mishkan, Mishkan of Korach, the tent of Korach, but it's not the word for tent. The Hebrew word for tent is Ohel. Mishkan is the temporary dwelling place, the dwelling place of Adonai. And so when Moses speaking for Adonai, Adonai says to get away from the Mishkan of Korach. It's very interesting. It's as if Adonai is saying, this is their Mishkan. They have made this their Mishkan, their holy tent. So Adonai comes down in judgment upon the people of Korach, Datan, Aviram, for their two insurrections here. The earth opens up and swallows them. Think about the Nile swallowing the babies of Israel. Think about the Sea of Reeds swallowing Pharaoh and his army. You would think that would be the end of the story. But the very next day, so this is chapter 16 in your text, the very next day, verse 41, the very next day the whole community of the people of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, you have killed Adonai's people, without recognizing that it was Adonai's judgment against their sin. However, as the community was assembling against Moses and Aaron, they looked in the direction of the tent of meeting and saw the cloud cover it, and the glory of Adonai appear. Moses and Aaron came into the front of the tent of meeting, and then we have this: the people began to complain again, and Adonai is willing to judge them. Get away from this assembly, and I will destroy them at once. But they, that is Moses and Aaron, fell on their faces. Moses said to Aaron, take your fire pan, put fire from the altar into it, lay incense on it, and hurry with it to the assembly to make atonement for them. So what's happening is the people are grumbling again. They're complaining again. And Adonai says, separate yourself away from this assembly, and I will destroy them. They fall on their faces. And then Moses turns to Aaron and says, get up, take your fire pan, put fire from the altar in it, and then put and hurry with it, and lay the incense on it, and take it to the assembly, and stand in the midst of the people who are rebellion. Because anger has gone out from Adonai, and the plague has already begun. Aaron took it and did. He ran into the middle of the assembly, and he stood there. The plague had already stopped. But he stood there. It says in the text verse, so depending on your numbering, English or Hebrew, it says he stood between the dead and the living. And this is the fascinating part about this parsha, where you see the smoke from the incense is supposed to mix with the smoke from the presence of Adonai in the most holy place in the Mishkan. And here Aaron is told, take your fire pan, take your censer, put fire from the altar in it, and then lay incense on it, and then take it not into the most holy place, but take it in the midst of the people. And we understand the purpose of this now. It says he stood between the dead and the living. And miracles happened there. So this is what I would say. This is how I would speak of this. It's a direct parallel to us in our lives. We don't have incense and clouds of glory smoke covering our heads, but at the same time we do have the presence of Adonai who has knocked on the door of our hearts, and we have opened the door and let him in. And so we have that presence with us, and we go and we stand between the dead and the living as an advocate. And this is our hope, to do that, to be an advocate, to be available to all peoples. So I'm going to leave that with you tonight. Thank you for joining me. Again, if you would like to subscribe, we are open to your subscriptions. That's a good way for us to make sure that you're aware of any teachings or of any special events or this kind of thing, special videos, that sort of thing. So we do recommend that you subscribe, and we just thank you for participating. I think we had a little video hiccup there, so I will bless you one more time. May Adonai bless you this week and give you a good week. Shalom, shalom.